All right, let's begin.
Hello.
Hello. Now we can actually. Yeah, he says just to go ahead. So
Oh, does he? Okay,
yeah,
bless
we
him.
yeah we've been given the go ahead. All right. I'm gonna do my intro, and I'll get to my discussion questions. One
Okie dokie.
second. I have them on my Kindle. So and I'll do my
Kindle.
hello. All right, here we are. Hello, hello. Welcome back to Coffee Break. I'm your host, Faith Jacobs, and joining me today is someone who I've had the pleasure to watch soar in their respective career. Thank you in joining me and welcoming back Jack Moorby, who has been on the podcast before, but I'm happy to always have him on. Now, I'd like to jump right into today's subject of conversation discussion for us to talk about, and the topic is neurodiverse advocacy in the world of the creative arts. To begin, I would say it's become a big deal in the last 5 years to have authentic representation on screen, not just in regards to sexuality, ethnicity, and gender identity, but also with neurodivergence. And I've seen multiple shows and books beginning to include authentic representation, be it Ready, Eddie, Go, Heartbreak High, A Kind of Spark, and The Asparagus Bunch. In my opinion, there's a beautiful world being built with better representation, but we know it's still in its infancy. With that said, let's dive into the conversation further. So, I would say, Jack, what do you think is like the hardest part of being an advocate in regards to asking for accommodations for yourself when stepping onto a stage, a set, or even a recording booth? Do you ever feel it is impossible to ask for accommodations or to be heard by those above you, even with such leaps and bounds that are being made in the industry?
I feel for me, it's the whole thing of I don't really know what my accommodations and what they necessarily are. And I don't feel it's hard to know until you're actually in there. So I did an audition once for a character who was on the spectrum, and I was auditioning with three other actors, and it was a really, really hot day, really hot, and we're all in the room together doing this movement workshop for this part, and we're all actually struggling with the heat. And that's a huge thing for someone who is on the spectrum because we have a lot of sensory issues. So, for example, one of the actors, I was fine. I'm used to working in warm environments. I've been, I've been in Vegas a lot and Utah, and I've jogged in Utah, so it's I'm okay with that sort of thing. But there was one actor who obviously we're all on the spectrum. He's on the spectrum, and he um he had to leave the room. He couldn't take it anymore. And there wasn't too much that could have been done about it. There was fans in the room. Um, it maybe if we had a smaller room, I don't know, so just so that the cooling system could reach us better. Um, it's that kind of thing of there's a sensory issue with that, and especially if you're working in theatre. Um, when I did a show in London, which was a whole cast of either deaf, disabled, or neurodivergent. There was some sound issues, and that caused some discomfort to one or two of the actors. Um, I think communication is another big thing as well because I there were emails between me and a casting assistant where they would not be too clear with what they're asking, what they're saying. So, say for example, they would use metaphors or sayings like, if I didn't get the part, they would say, you didn't quite check the list. Um,
Oh,
it's it's though it, or something along those lines, and it's those kind of things of there needs to be clarity, and I'm fine with that. I've understood that completely, but I know that there was another actor on the list uh, that didn't necessarily thought that that wasn't a very good manner of going about things. That
You
there's
you
not enough clarity.
do you feel like there should be more almost directness rather than like almost like a way of like beating around the bush? And
Mm.
s- do you prefer that?
Yeah, I do. And I think things that are succinct and things that are clear. There's no beating around the bush. It's just this is what it is. We don't need things to be. And I understand that it's probably done to be softer about things
Right.
to um to say if you're not getting a job, to sugarcoat it a bit just to make light of the situation, and I completely understand and respect that, but I think there does need to be a lot more understanding of we just say what you need to say.
Right. Yeah,
You
I
know.
feel that. I remember getting a rejection email and they were like, "Your dedication to the craft is outstanding, but your audition's not moving forward." Don't don't give a I understand that maybe they meant that as a compliment to try and soften the blow, like you were really good, but you just weren't right for the part. I would rather you either give me no email or at least give me an email that just says, "Thank you so much for your time. We're moving in a different direction," or something. Like, I don't, because I feel like that makes it worse. It was like, you were outstanding in your field, and we didn't choose you. You know what I mean? Like, it almost feels a little bit like I don't quite know the correct phrasing, but for me,
Yeah.
I kind of agree. I'm like, just either don't give me an email at all, and then I'll know that you didn't choose me, or give me one and just kind of be more forward. Don't try to, you know, be a little more direct.
Yeah,
um,
and I think a lot of I know someone, an actor on the spectrum who he gets tunnel vision. So he's very clear about what he wants. I get the sense that he's one of those people that likes to manifest things. And say he auditioned for a an amateur theatre production, and he was so determined that he was going to get this part, and he felt that his audition was great. They told him his audition was great, and then they made him wait a while for the results. He was getting a bit antsy about it, and then they got back to him and said he didn't get it. I I think there needs to be something dialed back from that. I feel like it's great to be complimentary, but sometimes in auditions that you don't get that the compliments or the positive the positive feedback.
mhm.
And actually, in a way, maybe that helps because you're not planting an idea, you
Right.
know.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree. I
yeah.
agree. My second sort of like discussion question, or like something to ponder is, what do you think is the biggest factor that makes it difficult for modern projects of the neurodivergent spectrum to get ahead? For example, over here in the States, there was this beautiful Broadway show called How to Dance in Ohio that featured autistic actors on the stage. It was wonderful. It was amazing, I felt, but its run was sadly cut short. Now, some people say that it's because it wasn't an already established media. It's not Wicked, it's not Phantom of the Opera, which they bring back a billion times, which, not to say I don't like either of those things, but do you think that's true, or is there a deeper issue in regards to ableism and fear? And this doesn't just apply to the show on Broadway, but it opens up the question, if people at the top won't give things like that a chance to bloom and only had 6 months on Broadway, if that, what hope is there for other shows going forward, regardless of the platform?
I do think there is an ableist issue. here in the UK, we have some really great theatre companies that professional theatre companies that tour the UK, and they have a cast in their show of deaf, disabled, neurodivergent, and what happens is I know of a production that people attended of a Shakespeare play that this company did, and they weren't necessarily aware of what the company stood for. They thought they were going to get an idea of what this Shakespeare of what this Shakespeare production was going to be, but they didn't get that. They got a a a telling with a very distinct cast that they weren't necessarily looking for. Um, so I do think there's definitely a an ableist issue happening. Um, I think and I think it does stop some things from going ahead because I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of people look for a certain standard in a production, and when they hear that people who have a disability are in it, it's not taken seriously that much. I think there's an
Hmm.
association. There's an association with it being almost amateur in level. You know?
Exactly. I do actually. I feel the same thing. I felt the same thing about some of the productions that we have done. That I feel I feel like I was talking to somebody recently, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm casting like neurodivergent actors, and they were like, yeah, if it works out, and I'm like, if it works out, it was like, and then I'm thinking to myself, are you saying that you don't think that me and a bunch of neurodiverse actors can pull this off?
Mm,
And I kind of just sat there and I was like, I hope it's just some unintentional on this person's part, but like, wow, like,
mm.
you know.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, maybe it's not necessarily that. It's a lot of other contributing things, like you said, it's there's a commercialism to the entertainment industry. There's a reason why so many new things don't happen, and so many old things, like you said, Wicked, for example, why that
Mm-hmm.
constantly keeps getting redone. You see it in the film industry.
Mm-hmm.
The films that people want to go see are what they know is nostalgia's a big thing now.
Yes.
What they know is good already. There's a reliance on it. I think maybe that's probably an issue actually that media with neurodivergence in it struggles with, because it wasn't the norm before, and because it wasn't the norm before, there's not a confidence in the new work that's being produced, because we all like to go back to tradition.
Right, right, I agree with that. And this next sort of, like, I guess you could call it a question, but more of a discussion. It's a little offbeat, kind of on beat at the same time. But I was having a conversation the other day with somebody, and it came up that, like, the idea that you are not disabled enough for accommodations, to me, is a thought that is disheartening and frustrating. What I mean by that is, like, Jack, you would say that you're like a physically able-bodied individual,
Yeah.
right? Get
Mm-hmm.
like, yes or no. Um,
Yep.
and okay, so you're capable. You're capable of walking, running. You can grab and hold a fork and a knife. Blah blah blah. You and myself as well are, by all accounts, physically able-bodied. Yet we are, by those same accounts, disabled, because autism is a disability. And here's a little fun fact: neuronormies. Autism comes with comorbidities: dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, OCD, epilepsy, and other disorders, either mental or physical. Yet the two of us here can keep up with our hygiene. We all have bad days. That's fine. We would speak, I would say, at least for me, without much obvious sign of our diagnosis. Maybe to other people we do, but I don't think you and I, you know. And for the most part, and I hate this word, we function well enough. Your mileage may vary based on what's going on. But all this prattle is to say, if someone looked at us in the streets, they'd go, "How can you call yourself disabled and in need of any form of accommodation when you look normal?" Harkening back to and I hate this phrase as well, "You don't look autistic, you're not
Mm.
disabled enough." My sort of question to pose to you then, how does it feel some days to be faced by ignorant individuals when the physical aspects of your respective comorbidities may not always be obvious to others? Because you and I appear to society as fully able bodied.
It's definitely frustrating. I always get a bit frustrated with some examples of representation, not just in the neurodivergent disabled community, but with other other facets, and the reason why is because I worry that it, the representation is not done for the right reasons. Um, so, for example, people who are disabled in the sense that they are on the spectrum, their disability is invisible. Um, they don't get a lot of representation because you can't see it. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
marketable. There's nothing marketable about it. There's nothing to show off. Like, look at us, we're being good at representation because we have an actor in the cast who has a visible disability or so and such. But I worry that it happens for the wrong reason because they're doing it so it makes them look good. It makes
Mm-hmm.
it makes the product that they're doing look good. It makes the people making it look good. Um, but suddenly, if you cast me in something, um, there's nothing obvious, um, and
Right.
you know and for that reason, it's not marketable as a inclusive
Mhm.
product.
And I feel like that harkens back to my problems with movies like Rain Man, my problems with movies like Sia's Music, my problem with the idea of a show like Atypical, or or a show like The Good Doctor. My problems with those shows are not necessarily that it's a bad thing to show the savant, the severity of having a savant autistic character. But my problem is that when you only showcase that, you then cut off people like you and me who we have our areas of expertise. Sure, I'm good at facts and history. You have your area of expertise. I however feel like it's like looking at people like that who are, or characters like that who are created, it's you're sitting there and you're going, yeah, but that's not my experience. And so like the problem of not having like any characters out there more like the Leons, more like the Addies from A Kind of Spark is like, oh great, we're doing a show about autism, but she's not very severe, or Leon's not very severe. Leon has moments where things get caught in the crossfire. He doesn't understand things, but that's an experience that I feel like you and I can relate to. Going, oh yeah, I once sat there and went, wait, what do you mean? You know,
Mm,
it's like it's stuff like that that I kind of sit there and go, we're not disabled enough for what productions are looking for, because what they're looking for are the more intellectually disabled or those with an obvious tick to their voice. You know what I mean?
yes.
And go ahead if you sound like you have something to say. I want to move on before I let you say something.
Um, and I suppose when it comes to say you have an autistic character in a film or such, um, they want they want it to be obvious in some way. They almost want the character to wear it on their sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, they would cast an actor who isn't on the spectrum so that they can have they can generate the illusion that the character they're playing is. And it happens so much I see it a lot in film media. Like, I'm remembering this Power Rangers film that was made
Oh
that was
yeah,
made a few years ago.
yeah, that.
And there was a character that was on the spectrum, but you could kind of tell he was from his behavior. There was a hyperactiveness, there was some tics,
Mm-hmm.
um, the way he talks about his interests. They really wanted to push for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not great for actors who are on the spectrum, because you're making us into an archetype or something.
Mm-hmm. Or stereotype, or another stereotype. It's like, yes, we have moments where it's. I kind of have talked about this before. I don't know necessarily with you or with anybody else in my circle of neurodivergent peers, but I've I've often had the idea that when you go to write a character, their autism should not be their whole personality.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
agree.
like you and I, like our autistic traits make us who we are. It's part of our identity, but it's not our whole identity. I
No.
have so many more other facets and interests and things that I can talk about, and what make me who I am, other than just that. And the minute you start, if I had started writing Jacob Faust, I'll use him as an example, as this very obviously autistic character without any other interest or anything, so if I didn't treat the character like a person, I don't think I would have gotten as good a positive response to him as I did. And the same thing goes for Edgar. And then the other character who I've written to be autistic, I wrote the characters just to be characters. Their autism was only one facet of what made up their identity. And it's the same thing in real life. And I think that's the biggest problem. At least that's how I see it. The biggest problem is like, you have to write a disabled character as human, not a
Yeah,
caricature.
yeah, I agree completely. There's so many characters out there that where it's worn on their sleeve, and while that's a good statement to an audience, it's not realistic, and it's
Mm,
not necessarily it's
mm-hmm.
perhaps not tasteful,
Yeah, oh,
if
great.
you want true representation.
Yeah, yeah, you almost have to write them like anybody else. Like you would write Jane who doesn't have autism, write Abigail who does have autism as Abigail. You know what I mean? It was like you have two different characters. One might not be in the spectrum and you write them as a fully fledged person, but the minute you go, "Oh, autistic, dyslexic," that instantly becomes their whole persona. And then
Yeah.
you've got just like a caricature of representation, not true representation. You mentioned Shakespeare earlier, which is interesting because I do kind of hate to bring up an elephant in the world of the arts, but there was a significant controversy with the Globe Theater, a non-disabled controversy, which boiled
Oh,
my
here we
blood.
go.
It boiled my blood too, and I want to talk about it because I don't see anybody on any podcast like really addressing like how offensive that was. While neither you or I may relate to the kind of disability that Richard III has, I really felt that casting a non disabled individual was taking away from disabled voices who could have easily stepped into that role. Especially as you and I have been talking, that the world of theater rarely has to say rarely, at least over in the States. I don't know, I mean, maybe there's more. I feel like you guys over in England have a much better chance of finding theaters that actually give disabled voices a chance. But over here, there's rarely a chance for disabled voices to shine, as we saw with Alliance in Ohio. Um, so my whole point is, if they're seen as inspirational or they're poked fun at. With regard to this situation, how did it make you feel as an artist on the spectrum to see this kind of happen?
I felt I felt disappointed because there have been a lot of steps now in theatre to have authentic voices to authentic characters, and
Right.
the thing with the whole Globe Theatre issue is that it was done because there was an actor who really wanted to play the part. Um, and that was their whole argument for why they went ahead with it. I just doing it because I wanna. Um, and while it was the norm, there have been loads of non disabled actors to play Richard III.
Right.
Um, we're now living in a much more progressive stage in the industry where you cast people who are much suitable for that part. So, for example, the RSC a few years ago, maybe even just 2 years ago, did a production of Richard III, and the actor who the cast, his name is Arthur Hughes. He 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 had a visible disability with his arm. His arm was, for lack of a better term, his arm was withered. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but it was um, his arm had a
Like a progressive disease of some kind.
yes, yeah, um, and I don't know the correct term for it, but something like that is appropriate for the character of Richard because he talks about being discriminated against
Mm-hmm.
for his physical form. It is clear that in the script he has a quote. This is his words. A quote. A deformity. Um, so you do need to cast an actor who has a a physical difference. I feel.
Right, right. It's like asking like a healthy person, or well, I have heard, and this is maybe a bad example. I have heard, so you know the character of Quasimodo from Hunchback of Notre Dame. In the
Yes.
stage version, deaf actors have played Quasimodo and Son for Quasimodo. It
Mm,
would be it's if it's clear in the script and in the story that this character is disabled, and Quasimodo is one of the rare disabled characters in older literature. Um, I would say that like it's like casting a hearing person on stage to play Quasimodo, who is a known deaf disabled character.
mm.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Um, and I definitely, yeah, I definitely feel um, we need to normalize. The world needs to normalize correctly casting because I feel like a lot of actors who are either deaf, disabled, or neurodivergent need to be cast in more things regardless. They don't need to even if the character doesn't have um, any deafness or disability per se, they still need to be considered, and there should be a movement to get people cast.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, you can't take away the characters that are meant for actors in that community.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge deal about that now with the upcoming Snow White film that Disney is making, or they've made. I don't
Oh
know if you know.
yeah. I
Yeah,
have seen
about
the controversy. Yeah, I'm very aware.
yeah,
Yeah.
because an actor, because the Seven Dwarves they only cast only one dwarf and the rest were uh didn't have dwarfism,
Right, right.
and there was a debate on live telly where there was an actor with dwarfism who
Mm-hmm.
who was making the same points I did, that you do not take away the parts that are meant for people in those communities, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. Because one person decided, I mean, it's like I understand to a degree that we don't want to put people into things because into stereotyped roles, but then you're also taking away just the chance for somebody to have fun in a role. I mean, those are
Mm,
fun roles if you remember the original one from the 60s, you know?
the original Snow White,
The
yeah.
original Snow White, like, they're supposed to be fun roles.
And to be honest, part of the decision why to cast actors who don't have dwarfism, because there was an argument made that the dwarves are portrayed in an offensive way in the original, and clearly the people who said that never saw the original,
Right.
because the dwarves are the best characters.
Yes.
They all have um they all have very likable personalities. They're very good at their jobs. They're very rich. They're
Mhm.
heroic. They're compassionate. You know, when a young girl was lost and alone, they gave her shelter and looked after her. When she got
Mhm.
allegedly killed, they avenged her. You know, they're
Yeah, like
great. Yeah.
it's a fun, it's like it's just meant to be a fun, silly, and then, you, it's not the only roles that people with dwarfism are meant for, but they can do other roles, but at the same time it's like, yeah, you are taking away, again, it's another form of disability you're taking away from other disabled voices.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
I
So.
agree, I agree
Yeah.
100% with that. So
That film needs to go in the bin, by the way.
yeah,
The
yeah,
new Snow
it
White.
it does. I agree 100% for a lot of reasons. My so switching gears just a little bit, I'd like to point out that I feel that it seems to me that there isn't much aside from maybe Ready Eddie Go and Asparagus Bunch that has been done for boys on the spectrum. No, in my opinion, past representation has never done justice to this. And I am seeing so much out there now for young adult women and young girls on the spectrum, which is great. It's wonderful. However, I'm a firm believer that we need some representation for all. As someone who is an incredibly capable man on the spectrum, what is your ideal autistic led male story that you might hope to see on either the stage or on the screen? And if you could bring it to life by your own hands, how would you do it?
I think a story about someone who is older, um, a man or a woman, in someone middle aged, or they're starting to go past that and they're on the spectrum. Because I realise that I think about this a lot now. There's no stories. There's plenty of stories about young people on the spectrum. There's not enough people. There's not enough stories about people older who have lived with it all their lives. And they've you know, and I understand why completely, because I think arguably stories about young people on the spectrum is way more important and relevant, because that's them growing up, that's them working out who they are, and um, but I think a good story would be to spin it and to say, okay, this is someone who has lived with it all their lives, and they know so much more about themselves than ever, and um, maybe you can show the juxtaposition between how how it affects their life now versus how it affected their life when they were a child, when they were a teenager, when they were just going into adulthood. Um,
I agree.
that'd be a very compelling story, I feel,
I
because
do too.
yeah, because there's not enough stories about older people on the spectrum, I don't think.
No, I
Uh,
agree.
yeah. Um, there's a great series called The A Word. I don't know if you've watched it.
I'm not familiar. I'll have to look it up.
Highly recommend. You would love it. It's a 3-season BBC series, and uh, you and what's great about it is that it centers on a family, and the young boy of the family, he's not old, he's not very old, he's about 4, gets diagnosed with autism, and the whole family, it's the family coming to terms with that and learning how to look after him.
Hmm.
But there's a character in it, the granddad, who's played by the wonderful Christopher Eccleston. He who doesn't quite understand autism, doesn't quite get it. There was even a line when he found out. He said, "Can it be cured?"
Hmm.
But then, as the series progresses, and you look at you look at some of his behaviours, and you start to wonder, are you on the spectrum? And you just don't realize it. And Eccleston even said in an interview that it's suggested through his behaviours that he is on the spectrum as
Hmm.
well. He just doesn't realize it. Um,
That sounds like actually
yeah.
like really. I I feel like I feel like I saw that while looking through Christopher Eccleston's like the other works. I was looking for what else he had done. I know he was in The Leftovers, of course, um, on HBO Max. I'd be interested to look that up and see if I can't find it on one of my streaming services.
Mhm.
That sounds good to me. Thank you.
No, I highly recommend it. I think you'd really like it.
It'd be exciting to watch. I've been looking for something new. Let's see. Yeah. What are some things you believe could be brought into the conversation in regards to how writers for television treat autistic characters that could be created in the coming years that hasn't been addressed in times past? Basically, what are some pitfalls you hope will be avoided and tropes you hope will never be repeated again?
Um, I might have said this on. It might have just been a chat with you or another podcast, but I think I don't want it to be treated as some superpower.
Right.
That's it's. Oh, I'm so sick of that. It's for example, I think you see a lot of it in Sherlock, don't you?
Yeah.
This hyper awareness and this super intelligence, and they see everything,
Right.
or super intelligence, and or let's not make it a quirky trait anymore. Let's normalize it. Yes, it can have its quirks, but and that's a very useful thing to make an audience find a character endearing. We love quirky people,
Right.
but I think we need to not make it this thing that is just wholly them, that they just they see everything, or they're really intelligent, or but in a social situation they're not very good. Maybe it'd be an interesting thing to see more characters on the spectrum who are actually really good socially,
Right.
um, because I know lots of people on the spectrum who are amazing socially. One person in particular who I work with a lot, he is he's really social, and he's really likable, and he gets on with everyone. Um yeah, something more like that. A bit more down to earthness.
Right, and maybe we can have characters who like we can show that they have their super interests and the things that they get really passionate about. Like you and I think could probably fill a whole podcast with some of the high interests of that is I really fell in love with Doctor Who and you really love Doctor Who. We could probably fill 3 hours worth of conversation of
Hmm.
all kinds of stuff. Or I could fill an entire podcast full of all the history facts that I know about Mozart. Now that since I've been doing that project,
Hmm.
we have our high interest points and things that like set us off on what I prefer the word passion rather than special interest. We're just very passionate people or
Yeah, there's
hyperfixation. Like
y-
I prefer passion.
yeah, I don't think that's something that should ever be lost. Is the way someone who is on the spectrum or allegedly on the spectrum is portrayed is the passions. I feel that is something that should never be lost, because
Yeah.
it's true to life, and also there is a quirkiness to it as well, but there's also a very admirable quality about it.
Right. It's
Like,
more endearing.
yes, and it's true to form. Like, there's so many people in history who were allegedly on the spectrum. We can't
Mm-hmm.
say for sure because there wasn't an official diagnosis at the time.
Right.
But so for example, Mozart,
Right.
he Walt Disney is another one. Um,
Right.
and I think they definitely roll with that when they made Saving Mr. Banks, the film with Tom
Yeah.
Hanks, because Walt Disney has this quirky nature to him, and this tunnel vision nature, and with his work and what he wants to get done, and so many people who aren't on the spectrum have that, but it cannot be denied that it's a very defining trait of someone who is on the spectrum, is that they they're the expert at their field and they
Mm-hmm.
live and breathe it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that should ever be lost. That's something I feel needs to stay, actually.
Yeah, but the idea of like observing every like we observe this, at least I do. I can speak for me. I observe the small details. I was doing a drawing yesterday of a portrait of Mozart, and I was like, well, yeah, I'm like, you take a notice at this life mask, and you look at the portraits. Here are his I'm like, I was pointing out like the small details that like other people might not be noticing, but I can't observe all the small details. I might miss a few, and I think that's what makes Sherlock. I think I understand why so many on the spectrum see themselves in him, and I don't think that we should ever dismiss or squash that, because I know many people on the spectrum, including myself, who really do relate to Sherlock and find him particularly endearing. But there are things you have to be careful about, this idea of like you said, like the superpower like mentality. Kind of, you have to be cautious of that, I would definitely say.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Um So I want to bring up the topic of limitations, because in the past year and a half, and kind of what led to me wanting to do this with you, was that I have been told that like to cast in the realm of neurodiversity is limiting. I'm sorry to say I personally disagree with the people who have said this to me, and here's my soapbox. Check your ableist pigeonholed viewpoints at the fudging door.
Mm,
Because I'm a little at my limit with like this mentality that to open the door exclusively to the neurodivergent community in regards to roles is limiting, because it's not. But what it does do is it shuts the door in the face of neurotypicals who, like you and I were saying, have told our stories for years. They've won awards for our stories, and this is to listeners, because like here's the thing: I'm a neurodivergent actor, director, writer, whole shebang. Jack is a neurodivergent actor and creative and advocate. And we're not limited. I have seen what this man can do. Hire him, for the love of God. Please.
please,
Please hire him. Narnia, I have your
please,
Prince William right here, over in
helpy.
England. But here's the thing: we can tell our stories. Your perception of us and what we are capable of doing is the only limitation here, in my very strong opinion.
Mm,
Now, my question for you and all that is, limitations, or the idea of being limited in your capabilities to act, to sing, to dance, to do and be anything, like we said earlier, is not just limited to the arts. But it is based on the fact that being neurodivergent, or looking for neurodivergent people and advocating for more inclusive choices in the arts, it equates something negative, when it shouldn't, and it doesn't. But I would say that's a strongly harmful thought, that that trying to be inclusive in this way equates, oh, you're shutting the door to other people. Well, yes, you shut the door to us. Now you know how it feels.
mm.
But have you faced something similar from people in the industry, based on the fact that you are openly neurodiverse, and how did that make you feel?
So, do I feel like it's closed some doors?
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Uh, Yes, potentially, and sometimes I mean, to be honest, it's opened quite a lot of doors too. When I left drama school, the jobs I was being seen for were actors who identify as neurodiverse or have a certain disability. So it has definitely opened doors for me. But I'm at a stage now where I don't really get seen for anything anymore, and I don't know if part of me second guesses is this something to do with my openness with it. It likely isn't. It's probably something to do with my type and my my skill set, and just I'm just not simply right for it. But um um yeah, I I feel like it certainly stopped me in school and early years of getting into drama and things from doing good parts. But professionally, it's hard to say. I think it has opened some doors, but potentially it's closed some. Um, yeah, that one's hard to say for me, I feel.
That's okay. I mean, it is an interesting thought topic because, like, I feel like I can't say for certain, but I remember when I auditioned for something voice acting wise, and they asked any more details about me, and I remember saying that I was a neurodivergent actor, and I don't know if that closed the door to me because that production had inherent ableism, or if I just wasn't right for the role. But I do know what you mean. It does feel like we sort of get like pigeonholed into certain things, and I feel like either, like we were saying earlier, either I'm not disabled enough for you, or my disability is the reason why you won't ask me to be, you won't invite me to the conversation beyond getting my foot like halfway in the door. It's like you let me in, but then the minute I open my mouth, you don't want me anymore. you know?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how it kind of feels sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, I feel the same way. You know, it's it's hard to say, but I feel like there are people out there who do hear the word neurodivergent and they either think, we're not quite looking for that, or what does that mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I agree with that. So that was a lot. Let's bring it back down to something a little light for a minute. When was the last time that advocating for yourself actually led to a positive impact in the situation regarding the creative arts? And even though you were saying you feel like some doors have been closed, how do you hope being open about it can help head directives and creatives foster better understanding because you are open about being neurodivergent?
I think a great thing for me was the Asparagus Bunch audio book. Um, because I feel like that was truly a moment in my working life as an actor where I am now an advocate for this because an authentic voice from an autistic character, and they wanted me for it because I was the right age for it as well, but also, I have the disability and some of the same lived experiences. Um,
Right.
yeah, that opened a door for me, and it may continue to open another door for me should we record the second book.
I hope you
Um,
do. Please, God, do.
I hope so. And um, uh, was the rest of the question, how do I hope it continues to open doors?
Yeah, how do you
Sorry,
hope
yeah.
it might continue open doors with other directives and creative leads to foster maybe a better understanding of you as an actor?
Um, I hope that there's a call for say if there is a production that explores a character with autism or something that they get more autistic people involved in the production, even if they're not playing an autistic character. So, for example,
Mm-hmm.
maybe if the protagonist is on the spectrum, okay, why don't you consider casting some of the people around them consider casting people on the spectrum, even if it's never said that that character is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's create a good environment for this project. We're telling a story about this theme. Let's get people together to help tell it. So I think just to be involved, regardless of if if I'm playing the character with autism, is really important. Yeah.
No, I
Mm.
agree, 100%. So let's pull back around to some of the fiascos we talked about. But this is like, the How Dance in Ohio, the Globe Theater fiasco. This is not the first time that I have seen or heard pushback on disability in the arts. And I don't know if you're familiar with Mickey Rao. He's an autistic advocate. And I've been listening to his book recently called Fearlessly Different. And he talked about the pushback on having an autistic actor play Christopher Boone. And it reminds me of some of the negative pushback here for what we were talking about earlier, the Richard III play, the erasure of disability, the denial of letting somebody with a disability step into a role, like we were talking with some of the films and the controversies there. My simple question here is, do you feel that there's been a strange step backwards lately? Have you dealt with adversity towards yourself? You've talked about being rejected from disabled roles. And I'll add that yes, it's common in this industry to be rejected. I've had my fair share. I know you've had your fair share. But sometimes it just stings. And like we've been saying, it just feels like you're not autistic enough, you can't do this role, or you're not disabled enough for this role.
Yes, that's my answer. No, um, yeah, I do feel like there's a pushback. Again, it goes back to that whole thing, my point earlier of sometimes representation isn't done for the right reasons, and even if it is sometimes, there's they're not wholly in it. There's a sense of that. So, for example, if for a theatre production, there's a character who is autistic and they want an autistic actor for it, but they cast they have they double cast it or they have an understudy, but the other actors aren't on the spectrum. Surely you'd want everyone on the spectrum if you're wanting to tell this story in the most authentic and tasteful manner possible. Yeah, and that's sort of part of my reason why I worry about it all being done for the wrong reasons. Um, yeah, there is a pushback. I don't even feel, I don't feel we're there yet because of it, because people do still, there are still productions out there that 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 push for being prolific, that they cast diversely, but perhaps that's it's only being done just to make them look good, and I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. Absolutely, if you've got a production with deaf, disabled, or neurodivergent actors, yes, push for it. Scream it to the heavens.
Mm-hmm.
But have your heart in it.
Oh,
Not to sound cheesy, but yeah, have your heart in it.
no, I agree. I agree 100%.
Mm,
Hmm.
yes.
Let's see. So there's so much that can be said about the discourse that I see. It's like we have, like a neurodivergent show, like a kind of spark. I don't know if you've seen that at all. It's been amazing to watch. To have a show like that out there, to have several shows like that out there now. Um, it's winning awards, this with this incredible cast of autistic girls. And yet at the same time over here in this corner and that corner that we've been talking about, there are just pockets of like ableism that just keep popping up. What do you hope that can be done to get us taking 2 steps forward rather than 5 steps backwards?
Um, cast more disabled or neurodivergent or deaf actors in roles that don't call for that actor to play that role. For example, this is going a bit off topic from the whole neurodivergence
No, that's
discussion,
fine.
but for example, I saw a clip from a TV program. Someone showed this clip and said, "Look at this actor. Can you tell me something? Can you notice something about him?" So I saw the scene and I didn't notice anything, and I said, I'm stumped." And it was a conversation, a dialogue between two people, um, and then they told me that actor is deaf, um, and I couldn't tell. I had no idea, similarly, so I think it's important. Cast more neurodivergent people, more deaf, more disabled actors in roles that don't call for it, that it's never ever brought up. I think to make it normal, to make it is vital, really.
I agree.
Um, I mean, you could counter that with, well, surely that makes the stories of exploring disability less important and less relevant. I don't agree with that. I still feel like people want to hear about others' lived experiences with things. It's something that never goes away. Yeah.
No, it's you're like saying like we should have more of a there's a word, and I can't think of the right word for it. But like if you ever read a book and someone brings up like it's awkward the way they bring up, "Oh, I'm autistic and I do this." You know what I mean? You don't want I'm deaf and I do this. Like you don't want it to be the most obvious
Yeah.
thing. Am I getting that right?
And I said that earlier about this bloody Power Rangers film because there was literally a line where the character who's on the spectrum said very hyperactively, "Just excuse me, I'm on the spectrum," and blah blah blah. And it's like
Oh,
people. I don't know if whoever wrote that. I don't know if you've ever met someone on the spectrum, but they very rarely announce it to people.
yes, it's like we struggle enough as it is. We don't necessarily like if you ever have had a conversation where you said to somebody, "By the way, I'm on the spectrum," you know how uncomfortable it is to actually tell somebody that you're on the spectrum because you're already trying to fit in socially. You're not going to announce your social what could cause you to be socially awkward or feel socially awkward or already different to your peers to the whole room.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that kind of stuff makes me cringe.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So my final question. But first, I'm going to say that thank you so much for this. You're wholeheartedly an incredible actor, and you've done a lot, Jack. Not only with things that you've helped me bring to life, but you keep making waves in your own incredible way, and you always amaze me. I wish I had the power to make the whole world see that you and everyone I've ever had the pleasure of meeting and working with are a gift because you are. You're a gift to me. I adore you. I respect you more than I can express, and you really deserve every chance to step into some incredible rooms with your beautiful voice because you and everyone else are the voices that we need in this industry. Um,
Thank you. I know.
you're you're welcome,
No,
Jack.
thank you. That's really sweet. Thanks.
Yeah, of course, always. I mean it genuinely. I mean it. But my final question is what do you think is the most important thing that someone can genuinely do to help make positive waves of good change for neurodivergence and for the neurodiversity community to thrive in the arts, be it the booth, the stage, or for film and television?
Don't tread on eggshells. Just on the top of my head, don't tread on eggshells. I feel um, there's quite a lot of stigma at the moment about vilifying the disability. So,
Yeah,
for
I've
example,
seen
you
that.
can't. For example, you can't have a disabled actor play a villain because oh no, you're vilifying that, and I completely understand that, and I think that's a very valid point. But at the same time, villains are very interesting characters, and they're often the best character in the piece.
Mhm.
So yeah, don't be don't be afraid to um don't try to make too much of a difference to the point where you're making a difference becomes very noticeable and glaring.
Right.
Um, yeah, yes, that is something I've not said yet. Yes,
Well, Jack, thank you so much for joining me. Your insight is always wonderful to hear and to bounce things off with you. Obviously, of course, you can follow Jack on his Instagram, his Twitter. You can please, for the love of God, give this man some roles because he deserves them. Um,
please.
yes, please, please, powers of B, make him famous so that I can say, look, he's on the BBC. I, I would like to
Make me rich.
make him a Dalek.
Oh, I would love to be a Dalek. I would love to be a Doctor Who monster or something.
Yes, please.
Oh, that would.
Or after the next doctor goes, we'll just make Jack the next doctor because we need a doctor on the spectrum. It's about
I,
time.
I want to be the master. Yeah,
Ooh, yes, yes, please.
definitely. Yeah, that'd be cool.
All right, Jack. Have a good day, and I will speak to you later.
Yes, thanks for having me. I will speak to you another time, no doubt.
All right, Jack. Bye bye.
Bye bye.